Hello, everyone. We have another story from Edgar Allan Poe that was channeled to me from my book Macabre Short Stories and Poems from the Other Side. This one is already published and is called Rupert the Time Traveler. What's interesting about Rupert is that I met him many years in my earlier journeys, and I was meditating and I could see him clearly. And what was really fascinating about our conversation is that it was in time-space. And this fun little statement came up that I have at the beginning of the story. It's saying, I'm stuck at a red light on the crossroads of a parallel universe. Because that's exactly what I felt like. I was sitting there looking at him, and he was in meditation and I was in meditation. He was seated on this bed that was made with straw of some sort, and a very humble abode. It looked like it was a cottage in England. His clothing was very British looking, from the Middle Ages. And his eyes were partially open, partially closed. He had long blonde hair, or to the shoulder. And he was unhappy, very, very unhappy. I had a conversation with him about his wife Jane. And it's interesting because during the story I mentioned Jane Roberts. And ironically, we had a comment recently from someone that was in our chat area that goes after some of our videos, the last Takita video. And he also mentions Jane Roberts too. So I thought I would add this story so people can hear about it. What's most important here is that Rupert is actually Metis. So I meet him first under the name of Rupert. Why he didn't continue using that name, I don't know, other than Andronicus knew him as Metis, and so he carries the name Metis for a long time, but probably throughout history he's Rupert. And what do these time travelers do? They do so many different things, and just because you have the ability to travel through time and space doesn't mean that your heart is filled with the things that you need. And this is a perfect example of it. And if you go through all the Andronicus transmissions and you see all the transformations that Metis goes through, and then also he was a target in many ways, but made himself quite vulnerable, very available to humanity, and went through a lot of different experiences, as I said. So he pretty much says that he's the one that is communicating with Jane Roberts. He searches to find Jane to fill her head with wisdom that she thinks comes from her brain. And so he seems like he was the one that was channeling some of the Seth information. And sometimes he's in a good mood and sometimes he's not. It looks like some of the information is coming from a good place and some of it maybe a not so good place at the time. The other thing that he said to me was, when I first met him, when I was seated, in a lotus position, just kind of communicating with him, kind of blown away by the idea that I'm communicating with someone in time-space where, it was real time. It was like making a phone call in history to someone. And so one of the few things he said was, he says, don't go into this place of fire with Buddha. And the other comment he said to me was very significant. He said, help me, I need to get away from Jane. And I thought that was really interesting that he said that to me, and it turns out that it was he was referring to his wife, who also figured out how to travel. And so went looking for him, and I think then he finds her, his wife, further on into the future, and there she is. So Jane Roberts, Metis or Rupert's ex-wife. I'll say it like that. A really strange story. Um, After he said that to me, he told me to stop Jane and keep her away from him or help him get away. And so I thought it was an interesting story. I didn't think anything of it. And about a month and a half passed, and a woman contacted me, and her name was Jane. And I said, "Oh, here we go." So she wanted to meet with me. At that time, I wasn't having people come over to my house and do private sessions, so I brought her into my house. My computer went haywire. I had so many different problems with my computer, just trying to record some things. And as we were talking, the energy came into my house. It was a very negative energy. I think she was looking for someone and very inquisitive about what was going on in my house. And then I felt like a very hostile vibe coming from her. So I knew there was something a little odd about our interaction. I gave her the information she was looking for. She wasn't happy with the information, even though I felt it was the truth. But I didn't say anything particularly negative because I don't think that's what she was looking for. I think she was looking for Metis or Rupert. And as she was there, after she left, he switched timelines, and maybe she suspected that I was involved in switching the timelines, or that I would help Metis in any way. And so she wasn't really very happy with me. So and I had some other interactions with her a few times after that, which on many occasions were not very pleasant. So I feel like there's a bigger story here. I'm not quite sure what it is. But anyhow, here is a story, and maybe it will have you'll understand a little bit what's being said.
Rupert the Time Traveler. He traveled through time without a care in his mind. This time traveler of old still weaves in and out of time, I was told. Caught in a vortex or set between timelines, he enters each portal without any sense of where or when he will arrive. He is a wizard of sorts, but not practicing, of course. Somehow he has been able to travel without resistance and never needed a time travel machine for assistance. There is no rhyme or reason to where he's going or what season. He's just floating through space, always at his own pace. He seeks adventure and any earthly benefits he can obtain. He sits on a straw bed that is slightly worn by his frequent trance-like meditation, because this is the seat where he falls deep into traveling to his astral stations. He is 30 years old, give or take a few more years. It is hard to tell since his eyes are nearly closed when he appears. Still much in a trance, he is bothered by his romance. His wife is angry because he refuses to work, play, or dance. Who is this man from Middle England who speaks quietly and politely, yet has hidden his secret plans of dominion? All the bickering with his wife has made his life most unpleasant. Rupert said, "All I want to do is time travel instead." So he sits on his bed, cross-legged, without any bread, and is able to transform his body to disappear in his head. Then he searches to meet with some other friend who lived 2 centuries ago instead. Yet the greatest challenge, he said, is to move straight ahead and peek into the future, where his life should no longer exist, or a time when he should be dead. Can it be that he has traveled hundreds of years into the future. He lives such a simple life, while all along he continues to hide these miracles from his wife. He stands by the door and then opens the portal floor. There he searches for women for conquest and men who will do his bidding or more. He flies through the wormholes, past the many timekeepers. He tells them a story and passes through all the peepers. It is a small space of quantum light that he seeks to find, where he can embrace all the places he enters at night. Sometimes he does good, sometimes he's bad. Sometimes he searches for all the gold he never had. Sometimes he wants power from the land. Other times he searches for Jane to fill her head with wisdom that she thinks comes from her brain. Yes, that Jane who is Seth. Maybe Rupert once was Macbeth or Shakespeare. It's true. You knew what I was trying to say to you. Rupert sometimes will give and take, or take and give. He lives a life of contrast because he gets bored with what he has. Who is this time traveler? Will he reveal what he is up to? Somehow he was given the ability to travel and experience a life of an unusual nature. He is free to exist in a parallel universe while living in Middle England during a time when his life was the worst. Would it be better to put this man's mind to rest by helping him leave his miserable life on a torn and tattered bed? He lives in an endless loop of experiences in the life in which he currently exists. So when he travels through time, he experiences life as if past, present, and future all currently exist. Now is that a twist? I searched and asked my guides, my masters of divine, please tell me, if you can, what benefits can Rupert experience by crossing timelines? Why doesn't he leave this place where all his misery exists, so he can fly to another life where he can have a place of bliss? The masters told me this before. Though he has found an open door, it is a greater torment for him to see the life that he cannot have, a life that could free him from his wife, who has made him quite sad. For the most important life of all is the life he is living now, though it be dull. So he tries to escape this tormented life with his wife. He will hate what he hates and still cannot pass through the karmic gate until he learns to be content with what is on his plate. Spinning through time, trying to cheat the karmic life, is not a good answer, for neither experience is right. So don't put up a fight. Take your journey into meditation, but remember, we must live our present life with all gratitude and greater insight. Stir not the pot of resistance, where we may have to repeat the same existence. Value what is here before you. Your destiny will guide you through, and there you will find many who adore you. Take a tour beyond the shore to fantasy and other possibilities.
Okay, so we hear the story about Rupert the Time Traveler, and as I mentioned a bit about, Poe gave me all of these stories. I didn't know much about it, and I did have this interaction with Rupert or Metis, but the story was pretty much crafted or given to me through Poe. And there's this whole thing about this kind of words of wisdom regarding karma. And regardless of what your situation is, try to understand what it is. Try to run away from your life, but actually deal with and relieve some of the karmic ties, entanglements, and so many other things that we talk about on the show. And it's just, if you can figure out what it is that you need to disentangle with certain people. I mean, everyone's going on their own journey. They're trying to sort out their life. And some of them, have grown. Some of them have not grown. So there's no reason for you to really belabor or put a strong focus on how others behave or try to micromanage or control them. And there's no sense in them being able to micromanage or control you. It has to be a mutual understanding. This goes for friends, family, spouses, and just understanding that sometimes just even energetically, if you disentangle from them, as I have those guidelines on how to do that, breaking ties, vows, contracts, and all that, you may find that it alleviates some of the pressure that is holding people together and asks to be released of any karmic ties to people. If you feel like you can't seem to have a resolve or there's always a conflict. But anyhow, there's a story of Rupert the Time Traveler, and thanks for listening.